Welcome to Enlightening Radio. This is Christine Andrew, and today we are talking about midlife, and we are talking about rebooting your life, whether you're in your midlife or not. Joining me for today's show is midlife reinventionist and author of The Real Brass Ring, Change Your Life Course Now, Dianne Bischoff James. Welcome to the show, Dianne.
Oh, thank you so much, Christine. I'm so happy to be here.
I was so thrilled to read your story because it is so applicable to really all of us, regardless of our age. So I want to start with the preface that you wrote in your book because it really spoke volumes to me. You wrote, "In midlife, I'd open Pandora's box, the raw, ugly truth hidden behind the well-crafted, ornate parade that I called my life. I loathed the contents. I was not proud of myself or what I'd accomplished. Instead, I was horrified and ashamed of the lies surrounding my big house, marriage, and the monstrously false trappings of the North Shore. This was not me. I inchwormed my way through the muck. I stood toe-to-toe facing the most powerful of all questions. Who am I, and what did I come here to do in this lifetime?" So my question for you is, what events led you to that place of awareness that you were describing, and were you actually surprised to find yourself in that space?
Well, Christine, I think I was one of those kids that I always can call myself a good soldier. I was given kind of an RX prescription for this is what's going to make you happy. When I was a kid, this is what's going to make you happy when you're an adult. Mm-hmm. And so I was told, this is pretty much what you do. You go ahead and you get the big education. You go out and you get some big career. You definitely get married by a certain time. Then you go and you accomplish as much as you can and surround yourself with all these big possessions. The bigger the better. Mm-hmm. The more the ring, the more the bling, the better you are. And then you run yourself crazy pretty much from morning, noon, and night, and then you go to sleep for a few hours and you do it again just to keep building up this big pretense of a life. Mm-hmm. And so I did all that. I had the degree from Northwestern. I was very successful in my career. I ended up becoming a marketing consultant, and I was very lucky. I had a lot of great clients, mostly in the Midwest. I had most of my business from referrals. I found that little mini mansion across from Lake Michigan and went for it. So I had the big house. I had the cute red convertible, which I really loved. It was a great car. And then I also got married on time. I was told you got to get married by the time you're about 28. Did that. I had the kids. I ended up having 3 children, had the marriage. It was a long-term marriage. And I spun that little cycle around and around and around every single solitary day. But with what I didn't realize is in spinning that around, I had all the symptoms of something was massively, massively wrong because I was 190 pounds. Mm-hmm. I was barely able to get up in the morning. I always felt like I had this dark cloud over my head. I really had to fight off wanting to cry most of the time. And so I could function in this world, but my inner self was so deeply, deeply repressed that I was also popping Prozac every single day just to kind of get through. Because when you go and you tell the doctor, I don't feel good, I feel so lethargic, I don't know what's wrong with me, they just write something out on a piece of paper and they hand it to you. And yeah. You hop off to the store, go to the pharmacy, and so I was popping pills just to get through the day. And so clearly I was doing the formula as prescribed, but on the inside, everything was this deep, dark, dirty mess.
I think we've all been in similar places. You kind of go in this mode, and you get used to what that mode feels like, and you're aware at some level that you've got this chronic sense of malaise. But like you mentioned, you're just kind of popping Prozac and going on with your life. What was it that brought your awareness to the fact that you're like, ooh, wow, this really just doesn't feel good?
When I was at my 38th birthday, I decided to give myself, it was really just a present. A couple people had said, oh, you got to go see this woman. Her name is Sonia Choquette. And at the time, now she's internationally known. She's a famous author and speaker and healer and intuitive. But at the time, for me, it was just kind of a fun gift. I really didn't know what she was all about. Mm-hmm. But because I had a couple of recommendations, I decided, okay, I'm going to go off and see her. And she had her office in her house in Chicago at the time. And I, drove down there and sat in her office for an hour, and for that time, for about 60 minutes, she took every single solitary dark secret I have ever suppressed. She laid them out on her table, and then she took a club and she just knocked them across the room, right across in front of me. And kind of in that fashion, it wasn't a sweet, soft delivery. It was pretty to the point, very, very blunt. And she said everything about my life was wrong. She said, you're living somebody else's life. You're doing exactly what your parents told you to do. She said, you're this Christmas tree, and you have all these bulbs around you, and not one of them are firing. And you better hurry up and grab the real brass ring, or it's going to be too late. And quite frankly, I didn't know what to do. I kind of sat there. I was completely in post-traumatic shock. I'm just kind of taking it all in, feeling like I was going to throw up. You know, my hands are like digging into the chair. And I just squeezed out only a couple words, and I'm like, well, what happens if I don't? You know, what happens if I keep going down this? And she said, then you're going to have to come back and do it all over again. Ugh. And she kind of just threw that out there, turned around, spun out, and off she was gone out of the room. And I thought, holy cow. I mean, she delivered huge messages to me that day. She said that I was supposed to be a writer and a teacher and a healer. And she said, write every single solitary day and come back to me. Don't talk to anybody else. Don't do anything else until you have written all your stories down. She goes, your stories are going to help people. And then she said, and I get to tell you this, you get to be a performer. And I can't say that to many people. She said, but you're going to do well in acting and performing, so you need to get yourself back on stage. And she didn't bring up the weight issue, although clearly I was overweight. I was probably the size of a sumo wrestler. And so she was kind enough not to say anything about that. But she addressed the Prozac issue, too. She said, you're living in chronic depression. She said, you need to get to your authentic self. And she told me to go to this place called the Hoffman Institute. She left me with a list of books that I had to read. And that was it. She kind of took off. So it wasn't like a mini reboot. It wasn't someone said, oh, you need to find a new career or you need to lose 10 pounds. It was every single solitary thing in my life was off. And she also said, you have this massively huge heart. She said, and your job, this lifetime, your whole job is to find your heart. And she said, you're in a fraternal relationship with your husband, and you aren't even close to understanding what your heart is or how it can beat. So she said, you are off track on every single solitary rail. Whatever you could do, it's wrong.
You were depressed when you went to see her, obviously.
Yeah,
so when she gave you this news, how did you sit with that? And did it resonate with you as truth when she delivered it to you, or were you kind of in denial?
Well, I stumbled out to my car because it was February and it was Chicago and it was probably 20 below zero. And I had to stand in my car. Now, I'll just never forget because I was wearing red gloves at the time. And I just started sobbing. And I started crying and crying and crying and crying. And I was putting my hands up to my face. And now my face is like red from the gloves. And the gloves are all like dark red because I was like bleeding over the inside of my car with these tears. And I had to go to a business meeting. And I couldn't really function for about 30 minutes. I kind of sat there. I finally kind of just ripped off my gloves and I said, okay, girl, just pull yourself together. Just tell them you have allergies. And I just kind of wiped my face off. And I thought to myself, I'll deal with this later. I mean, I knew that everything she said was accurate. I just couldn't believe. I really thought I was going to get this, like, amazing scorecard. I thought she was going to give me, oh, you're an A on this, you're an A plus on that. But instead, she gave me, like, Fs across the board.
Right.
And, but I had the stuff because I had been told to get the stuff. I was told, my dad, you know, German bred, ex-military, get all the good grades, get the big job, get the big money, get the big house, and then you'll be happy. So I think I knew that having all the trappings was a trap, but it wasn't until she called me out on it that someone actually peered into, I didn't have like a carry-on of issues. I had like a steamer trunk full of issues. And she opened it up, popped up, and threw everything out into the air for me to like really take a look at it.
You jumped into that then. And one of the areas I wanted to talk to you about was people who listen to this show. You know, people like you and I, people who have, you know, kind of been on the path of personal development and spiritual self-help and all of those things. You were someone who had been on that path for a really long time, and then you end up in this space where nothing fits. So one of my questions when I was reading through your story was, do you think that path that you had traveled, you know, following personal development and self-help and all of that, do you think that helped you along your journey, or did you feel like in those moments that, those hadn't been tools to you at all? What did you go to really get yourself out of this tremendous muck that you'd found yourself in?
Well, ironically enough, my original background, I have a BA in psychology and human behavior, and I have a minor in philosophy. So I have been kind of addicted to understanding metaphysics, all these different sciences of the mind. Anything I could put my hands on, I've always been trying to grab and read. I still have a stack of self-help books next to my bed, and that stack is always getting taller. It never gets any shorter because I'm kind of a voracious reader on that. And I've looked into everything. I used to study transcendental meditation. I looked into Dianetics the first time that it came, when I was old enough to really understand what it was. And so, I've really been always interested in the reactive mind and how things work and why we're here. So kind of the whole purpose of my existence. And in many ways that really helped me. But I think my challenge at the time is I didn't have the ability to separate my messages, what had been delivered to me as a child with really, really strong parents, from my heart. So I had basically, even though I had all that information, I'm kind of an integrator. I'm born to integrate. I can take 20 different things, and because I've been in business for so many years, I always have to do the executive summary. So I could take 20 different pieces of information and give you what you need to know in the short synopsis, because that's just a natural gift. It's just how I'm programmed. So I used to grab, little pieces of information here or there. But what Sonia's wake-up call did for me is it forced me to kind of go back to my roots, take a look at all those different the different learnings and teachings that I've had from so many different masters, and really see, once again, go back to the real question, kind of where you started this, what was my purpose? What am I here to do? And then, because I'm really like to analyze and be on the accountability side, I started counting my days. And I added up, and I said, okay, I'm basically 40, and I figured if I'm going to be on this journey, and I've got 30 years at least, maybe after 70, I'm going to want to kind of relax a little bit and chill out. I only had 11,000 days to straighten out my whole life. So I went back to the roots. I applied both sides, both my metaphysical side and my practical business side, and I tried to put them all together to come up with answers for me, because I had to wipe the slate clean, not only from a physical part in this world, but also pretty much from a spiritual aspect as well.
Well, and, you had to fix virtually every relationship in your life, right? Your relationship to work, your relationship to your husband, your relationship to food. How did you begin to tackle those really heavy issues?
Well, the first thing that happened, and this was just very much serendipity, is that I found one of the people that she had told me to look into was Esther and Jerry Hicks. And most people know, and now in this field, that they're pretty much the four founding fathers of law of attraction. Yeah. And she had given me this list of 10 books, but Esther and Jerry were coming through Chicago. So I had this really unique opportunity to go and sit and listen to them in person. And this is when they were doing a road show, and they had their camper driving around, all the different states. And they just had a ballroom in a hotel. And they were passing out at the time they were pamphlets. They didn't even have a book. They just had pamphlets. They kind of downloaded some of their audio tapes. At the time, this is the cassette tapes, the old-fashioned cassette tapes. And so I have the original books that they were promoting. And one of them, of course, is called The Law of Attraction. Then they had The Law of Deliberate Creation. And then they had The Law of Allowing. And Esther was the first person, as she channels her guide called Abraham, was the first person that ever really got through my brain. It was like that, like someone's actually really speaking to you, and right there, go right into the heart, right into the head, right all the way to the soul, to the feet. And she got me. She was the one who basically said, anything that you're thinking about, paying attention to, focusing on, even dreaming about, talking about, all that's coming your way. So make it good. And so she was the one that first resonated with me, because I had the world's worst stinking thinking. my thinking was so dark and so black. And I used to always, because again, kind of programmed from post-depression talk, everything I used to think about was how something wouldn't work first, and then maybe it might work, but I used to use all those in my words because I'd heard all that growing up, oh, be safe when you go outside, and oh, I hope you have a safe trip. And I could never figure out what the heck was going to happen to me. Why do I have to be safe all the time? I didn't know if people were going to jump out of the bushes or what, but I couldn't figure out why everything was about the negative side of things. So Esther really was my very first, it was one of the first philosophies that resonated with every cell in my being. And that was my first shifting, because I started changing my words and looking at my thoughts. And then the second piece that really made the shift happen for me is I marched myself off to the place Sonia told me to go to. She said, you got to go to Hoffman Institute. They're in California. Now 90,000 people have gone through this program. And she said, you need to completely scrub the inside, because my inside, the aspects that would allow me to have self-love, was so shut down, and I had so many vines and murky, dark things that were wrapped around my core that I really don't know, even if I said happy words all day. I was the queen of superlatives. Mm-hmm. But I don't care how many superlatives you use. If on the inside you still think you're unlovable, not worthy, you're going to be rejected, alone, penniless, and sad all the time, I don't care how many good words you use. I had to get to the core issues. I had to get to the self-love issues, and that's the place that allowed me to kind of beat it out of myself, clear it out, and come back this brand new spanking baby at 40 years old.
Dianne, we've got to take a break, but, one of the things I want to just address really quickly is that you're speaking about your journey, but I think what you're describing is something that we're all familiar with, whether it's consciously or not. At some level, we all have stinking thinking, have limits that we tell ourselves, oh, I can't possibly do that, or I'm not safe, or I'm not good enough, or I'm not lovable. And the Hoffman Institute I have not attended, but I tell you, I just hear such incredible things about the work that they do on those deep emotional issues. So we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back talking with Dianne Bischoff James. Dianne, in the last segment, we were talking a little bit about this wild journey that you were on that, went over a 10-year period of time, and how you became aware of the fact that you weren't really living your own life. So let me ask you, part of rebooting your life, restarting your life in your own image, is getting closure and endings to the things that need to leave your life so that you can do that. Can you talk a little bit about some of the endings and the transformations that you made to some of these relationships to get your life rebooted?
Yes, absolutely. One of the things that really helped me is I became hugely aware and just really raised my consciousness on just the cyclic nature of everything. Mm-hmm. I like to address things sometimes from the conceptual aspect. And it just really occurred to me that oftentimes I was very resistant to the beginning, middle, and end of all these cycles. So I started taking a look at where I was and doing a really honest evaluation on if I was going to end cycle on something, I would literally practice confronting the end, knowing that it was the end, feeling that it was the end, and actually moving through the ending. Not with as much resistance as I'd had in the past. And one of the things that I needed to end was a lot of things actually, but one of the things was my relationship with my spouse. And we had been together for about 16 years. It clearly was just the end of this cycle, and I used every manifestation trick in the book, tried to coach myself through how I was going to do this, how I was going to approach it. I had to be the one to actually bring the topic up and to actually walk through the ending. And so I created the pretty picture the way I wanted it to go. I imagined everything going the way I thought it could. And then when I actually presented the option and actually had the guts to go down and say, this just isn't working for me, it was funny because the response from my husband at the time was pretty much just okay. And it was not dramatic. It wasn't, there weren't people throwing glasses across the room. I mean, there wasn't this big emotional outburst, which I think people are terrified of. And so I had to walk through not only the ending of that relationship, but I also had to, go through how to get rid of all these acquisitions I had. I didn't want the big house and all the property after a while because the recession was coming and it was just a bad idea. And I realized, you don't take that stuff with you anyway. So I started to have to dismantle the house. I had to tell the kids that this was going to be a different type of life for them. I had to end a lot of things that weren't working, especially some of my personal relationships, which was the hardest thing that I did, to actually look at some friendship relationships and see if they were being supportive and positive and juicing me up, or if they were just being those drains. And I had to come super clean with everybody in the moment. And that took me a lot of years of practice. But the endings are, in many ways, they're just the most beautiful blessings of all, because the minute I did end something, it didn't take very long. Once you do close that door, the window just opens up, and then new beautiful relationships can come in. So I have been able to see the blessing of endings, and I actually recognize very clearly where I am on the cycle, and I come very clean with myself on when it is time to end something, and I will address it in the moment. And that makes everything so much easier because you take all the emotional reactivity out of it.
Well, and I'll tell you, Dianne, that takes me back to the last segment when you were kind of highlighting the deep emotional work that you did and really your skill at working with the laws of manifestation. You know, it was a thrill to read through your book and the games that you played. When you're in the middle of driving all of these endings, you know, when you're in the middle of putting closure on areas that need to transform so other new things can come in, a lot of resistance can come from the people that you're doing that with. And do you think that the emotional work and your manifestation work helped you commit to your own authentic truth during those really difficult transitions?
Absolutely. I think that the process of manifestation, if you really understand how it works and how to use it to your best interest, we get to preset our concepts in many ways, and I use that tool quite a bit, where I think through what is the most positive possible outcome, live it, kind of go through it a little bit emotionally before I ever make any of these big changes. And then when I'm in the middle of it, I also, biggest gift that you ever have is you don't get to control the outcome.
Mm-hmm.
So I found that I was so afraid of some of the outcomes at the beginning, because what if the person says no? What if they do have a fit? What if this doesn't go my way? I actually learned to release my control of the outcome. All I'm able to do is to manage my own circle. So I can come clean, be truthful in the moment, but I had to deal with my own fear and resistance, as you mentioned, of the potential consequence. In some cases, people don't say, oh, yes, sure, let's just end, shake hands, and walk away. Sometimes someone will either give you negative feedback or they could be very upset. And so I stopped trying to, and this was one of my issues, is to try to manage other people's responses, which is kind of silly if you think about it. But I actually was terrified of what they would say, or what if they reject me, or what if I'm all alone. I mean, I was afraid of the basics like everybody else.
So how did you do that, Dianne? Because I can hear a lot of people listening going, well, okay, but I want to control the outcome, right? I can hear everybody saying, you're like, but I want to decide what the outcome will be. How did you learn to release that and just own your own decision?
Well, that is probably the biggest life lesson I've had since I met Sonia. I used to want everything to turn out the way I wanted it to. I'll be totally honest. Control freak 101. But the truth is that what I'm afraid of on the other side sometimes happens. So, the one thing you're most afraid of, I think I kind of summed it up in three different things. People are most afraid of either they're going to get rejected, someone's going to say, forget you're horrible anyway, and they're going to tell you these messages that you probably believe about yourself, or that you're going to be penniless and that you'll never be able to feed yourself or your family, so you have the scarcity issue. And the third lack is that, lack of self-love. Well, no one's going to love me anyway. So I went through these I had to walk through all three of those. What if I'm penniless? What if I'm alone? What if no one ever, ever, ever loves me or sees me for who I am? I think those are the biggies, and I had to walk through all of those. And the funny thing is, because I felt like those were my biggest lessons of my life, is to walk through them and deal with the results on the other side. Strange part is, and the most beautiful part is, that I found that my own self-love just increased every time I went through it. So if I was alone for a while and I decided to leave all my friendships or relationships because I needed to find things that were more healthy, I started liking myself better. And when I went through the Hoffman process and came back with this giant bouncing baby heart, I really liked myself. So the time I was spending with myself was actually more fun. And I found that when I was resonating with this higher sense of self-love, which is, really the wholeness that I think we're all seeking in life. Big secret. We're all trying to actually love ourselves first. Is that going through all of these things, I didn't need to control the outcome. Mm-hmm. All I had to do is put myself out there. I always look at it like a matching grant. My first part of the grant is I have to do my part, whatever that might be. Be clean, be honest, and state my piece in the moment in a healthy way. And the other 50%, that matching grant, I don't know how it's going to come back, but all I've found is every time I do it, just amazing things come back to me that I could never have anticipated in a million years. But sometimes you have to go through the uncomfortable part, and we don't want to. And I think that's the challenge. We're so afraid to actually deal with ourselves that when you really love yourself, the rest of it becomes much, much, much easier. So and I have lots of tricks. In fact, I have a whole second book that's going to be on the tricks of the trade and how to make all this so much easier for us, because I didn't have a roadmap when I was going through all this. And I do believe I'm here to help present that map so other people, as they make shifts and changes, can make it much more comfortable and a smoother process.
Well, and I think, it's really one of those undervalued, underspoken elements of making some of these life changes and learning first what your truth is and second that you're willing to do it, is that when you release the outcome of what's going to happen on the flip side when you show up, a lot of times, at least what I've discovered is a lot of times you're so pleased with how you showed up, that you did show up, that it really, the outcome, what happens on the flip side of that, it pales in comparison to your ability to feel happy about what you've done on your end.
And the knowing you don't get to control somebody else's response. I really, at some point, really believed I could somehow manage how someone else was going to respond to difficult information. You don't get to control that. That's not in your circle. And I don't know, I was so afraid of those basic fears that when I actually found myself at one point where I really don't think I had any friends. I'm like, oh, what if I'm friendless? And I'm like, wait a minute, you are friendless. And what's really funny is when you get to sit in that period of time of being, well, first of all, you have more time.
Yeah.
You have less people bothering you. But also, I found that I started choosing to do things that were just fun for me. And it wasn't like I was sitting all alone and never went out of a house or did anything. I just didn't have a lot of intimacy in my relationships because I was cleaning house. And it can be kind of scary and uncomfortable to do that. But I started, it sounds really weird, but I started liking the smaller things that I was doing. I would go to the beach and I would just actually really enjoy sitting for 1 hour with having me in the water and just kind of communicate my nature time. And I had more fun going to the grocery store, because the weird thing is when you're really liking yourself, other people open up to you in really funny, weird ways that is very satisfying. Mm-hmm. So I had to walk through all those fears. And so part of it's the awareness, but part of it, and this is something that was really interesting, I had the opportunity to see Deepak when he was in Chicago too, and he gave a lecture in Chicago, I don't know, several years ago. And one thing he said to me, that he said just a very small thing in his lecture, and it kind of helped change my mind, but he said, someone said, how have you been so successful? And he said he knows strategically what is the most important thing to do, and he does it. And somehow that, I don't remember anything else from the lecture, but I remember that. And I thought to myself, how many times have I procrastinated? Mm-hmm. How many times have I done everything but? I mean, sometimes I don't want to do a proposal to such a level that I'll go out and clean the garbage cans. I'll do everything but what I'm here to do. And I stopped doing that. Mm-hmm. And I really became honest and accountable with myself. And I look at my boots, and I'm like, if your boots are going to the left and you're trying to go straight, you're not going straight. You're going to go to the left. So I started adjusting my boots, actually physically. I could make myself sit at my desk and do what I came to do. And so I remember, if Deepak can do it, I can do it. And so I started being really vigilant with my time. Mm-hmm. And making sure I was working on the most important things. So when you have more time, more availability, and you're making these big shifts, do the important stuff and stop with the procrastination and the avoidance, because it's so easy to not do the uncomfortable stuff.
Well, and I was so glad that you addressed that piece of resistance in your book. To me, what I've discovered is there's a wealth of information when you discover you're resisting whatever, right? Mm-hmm. Like, you should do A, but you're really doing B, and you know that you should be doing A. Man, I tell you, those resistance pieces provide a wealth of information that are really helpful to pay attention to.
we just had a whole workshop in Illinois and had, 30 beautiful people in this workshop, and that was one of our exercises. We all know why we're resisting, too. That's the other funny little trick, is that everybody deep down at your core level, I had to ask myself, I didn't want to finish the book. And I had to come clean with myself and say, I don't want to finish the book because, and at first you're like, oh, I don't have time. I don't want to finish the book because, and I got deep down. I said, because people are going to read it.
Right.
And then what if they don't like it? Talk about dealing with rejection. I had to face my own phenomenal fear of just rejection at the core level.
Well, and sometimes when you can look at it from that perspective, it becomes almost silly, right? But you've got to pull it out and look at it. And honestly, Dianne, one of the things I don't want to do is end the segment, but we need to. So we're going to go to a quick break, and we'll be right back with Dianne Bischoff-James. Welcome back to Enlightening Radio. Today I'm talking with Dianne Bischoff-James. She's the author of The Real Brass Ring. And Dianne, we talked a little bit in the last segment about transforming your relationship with your husband. And earlier in the show, you were talking about the unhealthy relationship that you had with food. And so I think everybody who's listening is in a period of transformation in their own lives, whether they recognize it or not. And, we're all in the midst of changing every day. As you began to look at the relationship you had with food, what did that relationship tell you about what you needed to change and why you had allowed it to develop the way you had?
Food for me, I believe pretty much for my first half of my life, was probably my only love. I'll be really honest with you. I was, even from early childhood, I ate to feel better. I ate to reward myself. I ate to protect myself. I ate to also punish myself. I think I had both ends of that sword going on with food. And it was by far the most complicated relationship of my life. And the thing that really helped me the most with food is that after I came back from the Hoffman program, I realized, just like Janine Roth's book, one of the best books I've ever read on food, When Food is Love, I realized that was my only loving, supportive relationship. And clearly that was totally unhealthy. So what I had to do is to find I thought my mechanism for eating was broken permanently. I used to just eat because I was told to eat because it was night, eat because it was day. I would just eat all the time. I also would hide food. I don't know why I was, my mom was kind of like a food hoarder, so I used to have like food hidden all over my house. So for no particular reason, and I would just, take out the food when I'd have either a good day or a bad day or good moment or bad moment. So I had to really break free from all that. And I finally started just doing her basic philosophy is, what if you actually felt hungry? I mean, it sounds so basic, but I didn't have any of those feelings going on. I never felt hungry. I had to kind of recraft my own mechanism, study my own behavior on food, and then also use a lot of tricks for myself to get into a healthier food behavior. So I started kind of locking the refrigerator after about 5:30 at night. It was not real locking, but because I have kids in the house, but hypothetically locking the fridge. And so I really ate during the day. I would do complete feasting, whatever I wanted, went for the good food, went for the bad food, went for anything, but I knocked it off at night. And because I was able to really do that, I felt satisfied because I was fulfilling myself during the day, but I didn't have the unwanted calories at night. And I also got into acting, which was my passion and my love, and was on stage dancing and doing crazy can kicks for like 4 hours a day. So the weight just literally fell off. So for me, it was very much feeling my body, getting into my body, and asking my body, what did it want to have? And if it wanted a hamburger and french fries, it had a hamburger and french fries, but I didn't munch myself out all night. And that was my biggest trick. I had to work with my own cycles of my body with food, and I've been able to lose an additional 6 pounds by doing the exact same thing and really just being hyper vigilant on what I needed when I needed it, and also giving myself tons of treats if I felt like it, just not all day.
I wanted to share with you one of the things that I learned from your book that I think applies to everyone is, we've been kind of focusing on your individual relationships with your husband and with your finances and with your work and with your food and all of that. But at the root of everything, when you decide that you need or want to change your life, you did exactly the magic key that changes every other relationship in your life, and that is changing your relationship to yourself.
Absolutely.
So what kinds of teachers and wisdom helped you along that path as you decided, hey, I'm going to quit looking at outside to all these other people and things. I'm really going to look inside and start changing me inside?
Well, and there's so many incredible books and masters out there that oftentimes when I go to these shows and touring now, what I do is I keep a little pad and I hear people's stories and where they are, and I write down the right trick for this person, the right book for that person, the right program. So I have kind of a wealth of information. But a couple of the ones that have been the most powerful for me is Gay Hendricks by far. Conscious Loving and Conscious Living I would recommend for everybody. It's the book that talks about really how to come, he calls it micro-truthing. That's how to actually understand what your truth is in the moment and how in a healthy way communicate it so that it never bubbles up, boils, and you don't stuff things, because I was a huge stuffer. And so Gay Hendricks, I think, is one of the best authors out there, in that he talks about a book that helps you unpeel your own onion so that you can get to what your truth is in the moment. And he's gone to many scary places, too, with stating that truth. So you have to deal with also the fear, and like we talked about earlier, the consequence of being in your truth. Mm-hmm. And one of the other ones that is just amazing to me is, Neil Donald Walsh. One of the pieces that he wrote that I still find to be absolutely fascinating is like the 10 illusions of humans. And with these, one of the basic illusions, and this gets back to some of my, I put together 14 rules, shortcuts for happy living. And one of the basic premises that there's an illusion of need. Because if the world is perfect and in perfect working order, then we don't need anything. And we have set up our world here so that, we need to have more stuff and more money and more possessions and more activities and more trips. And if we're already perfectly in working order and everything is as it should be and all we have to do is be, then it flies in the face of what we're running around doing all day. Mm-hmm. So he kind of got to the core of the issue. If we're already perfect as we are, then a lot of these activities that we're doing is fantasy. And so I really started getting back to everything as a choice. The basic need that we have is what? Water, food. We need a place to lay our head, a nice outfit, and, a little bit of rest. Everything else is a choice. And I started being really diligent with my choices. Like, how am I spending my time? Is this moving towards my purpose and my future, what resonates positively? And there's so many other, amazing, amazing teachers out there. I could go on and on and on, because I think they all have core messages and core nuggets that have been phenomenally helpful.
What I've discovered in my own life is that as I'm ready, someone shows up. Sometimes I don't even realize that I'm ready to learn, a particular lesson or, find new wisdom or whatever. And it kind of shows up in my life, and I'm like, head thunk, right? I could have had a V8. Of course, that's what I needed to learn, right? It sounds like that's what happened in your journey of self-discovery as well.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, my most recent one that I'm just crazy about is Journey of Souls. Changed everything. I mean, you read that one book at the right time, and it basically is 2,500 people's experience, supposedly, of passing over. So what happens in the afterlife, and why are we here? And I put it on my car. I could not be happier to drive in my car, because every time I put on that tape, I was learning a new nugget of information about the spiritual world and how we dropped in and what kind of contracts we had and who we've agreed to work with and why we've agreed to go through this is to experience wholeness through our lessons. Mm-hmm. Changed everything. That meant that every experience I was having, anything that was challenging, was there for me to actually get the lesson. So I start looking for the lessons and stop resisting and running away and pushing back from them, but actually coming kind of clean with myself and saying, okay, this one's tough, but this is the lesson you need to learn about experiencing yourself, your heart, relationships, all the hard, the sticky stuff in life is what we're supposed to be learning.
Exactly. Well, and when you can approach them from that perspective instead of, I'm being punished or I'm being forsaken or whatever, and view it as, hey, this big gift showed up and now I'm going to unwrap it. Dianne, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we are going to revisit where we started this show and talk about who we are and what we're doing here. We'll be right back on Enlightening Radio. Welcome back to Enlightening Radio. This is Christine Andrew, and I've been talking with Dianne Bischoff James today. She's got a new book out called The Real Brass Ring, Change Your Life Course Now. Dianne, if folks are in their own place of transformation, if they want to make some changes in their own lives, how can they get a hold of you?
We have a website, and it's called liveyoureverything.com, and it's intended to be kind of like a sanctuary for midlife transformation, midlife rebooting.
When we started this show, we really started at the place you were in your life where you were wondering, who am I and what did I come here to do in this lifetime? And, we didn't get into all of the transformations, but there were many over this 10-year period of time. So at the end of this period, what have you discovered about who you are and what you're doing here?
Well, the one big lesson that I learned is that my heart would not invest in any compromises. Mm-hmm. I became very, very clear on what it is that I wanted to do, and I feel like part of my journey of this lifetime is to go through as many struggles as possible that man might experience so that I might be able to help other people. So my depression just cleared and lifted once I got on my purpose and I started doing everything that I loved. I was so fortunate. I went from kind of a loveless experience in my relationship to not only finding my heart beating and finding love. I'm now engaged. I went from the wealth to poverty, back to wealth. I went through the transformation of divorce and now have incredibly happy children that are incredibly successful and have gone through that experience with the least amount of discomfort possible. I also found a very passionate career. I became a SAG actor. I did 5 movies this year, which were a whole lot of fun, and had the chance to be on set with Paul Sorvino, and some of the Hollywood A actors came to Chicago, and I've had the chance to work with them. Wrote the book, and now I'm doing a tour all over the country, doing expos and speaking at about 12 different places throughout 2015. I also had the chance to reconnect with my body. I've lost 55 pounds, kept it off, and I'm now kind of a developing yogi. I can do the splits at 53, so I think that's not too bad. I can touch the floor and do the splits, so I'm coming back in touch with my physical body, trying to get back into total fitness. And I've also had to deal with a lot of endings, some death through some of my relationships. Some people have passed, and trying to look at the perspective of life purely from living in passion, with passion, all the time. And I call it the love and inventory. I make sure every day I do at least 10, 15 minutes of things that I truly love and help me resonate with my authentic self.
So, Dianne, for people who are in their midlife, who are listening to you and are sitting somewhere in the quiet of their own minds thinking, but I can't do that, what would you say to them?
I would say doing literally 5-10 minutes a day of something that you love will transform you. So often people are shut down, or they're in the I have to do for others, I'm always in service, and I'm a victim is not real. That is absolutely 100% inauthentic. If you can take a little bit of time, even once a week, where you go out and you either take that walk, you reconnect with nature, you plant something, you sing, you do anything that makes you feel good, will help recreate that positive resonance so that you can remember what it feels like to be your authentic self. Because we're supposed to live as our authentic, happy, joyful self with no apologies and no excuses. And that was the one thing that I really had to turn and embrace. So the book is, for many people, they're finding it to be very helpful because it touches on so many different levels. It's available on Amazon. But if you find that this resonates with you, grab it and read it and see if there's anything about it that can help you move from 0 to 1 to 2 to 3 and then all the way up to scale 10. Because 10 is living every single solitary day in joy, in peace, and in total happiness. And I have to say it's a whole lot more fun to live on this side of my version 2 than version 1.
As you said when we opened the show, we get kind of trapped and lulled into thinking our lives are, just you get up and you go and you do the same thing and then you go to bed and then it starts over again. And it becomes this drudgery, this robotic kind of path of living. And really, it's all about enjoying your life and having fun and, discovery, the discovery of yourself and others.
Exactly. And I believe when you go to the other side, they're only going to ask you one question. I think whoever's going to meet you over there, whether it be a loved one or Mother Teresa or, Buddha or Jesus, whoever it is, they're going to only ask you one question. And that question is, did you love your life? And I don't know about you, but I really want to be able to say, yes, I loved every bit of it, and I did everything I came here to do.
Yeah. To your point, I think once you get yourself in the place where you can sit and have that moment of recognition of like, I love my life. I love my life as it is right now, warts and all. That is the place that we all want to get to. So, Dianne, I thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really just enjoyed how much you shared of your journey and what you discovered along the way. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate being here.
That will do it for us this week here on Enlightening Radio. We'll see you back here next week for more.